Welcome again to my YouTube channel. Hi guys, today we're going to be reacting to another video. We're going to be reacting to the discoveries that prove humans are absolutely insane. And yeah, we're going to be reacting to this video and we're going to see what makes humans actually, like what proves that humans are absolutely insane. In my opinion, I actually think we are insane. Like, is that even a debate? Like, look at the things that people are doing right now. Murders are high. Crime is high. I mean, like, that doesn't prove insanity. I don't know what will. But anyway, we're going to find out today. And without further ado, let's get right into it.
That we are by far the weirdest and most deranged. So much so that I don't think it's crazy. Humans are a very odd bunch. So much so that I don't think it's crazy to say that we are by far the weirdest and most deranged animals on the entire planet. And pretty much anywhere you look, there is evidence that reflects this. So it's not really that shocking that over the years, various paleontological and archaeological finds have been made, which can only be summed up as horrifying or extremely bizarre. But like everything, there is levels to this, with only some being so memorable that even the researchers who made the discovery are left a bit scared, bewildered, or in awe. And a single find that managed to give scientists all three of these emotions was the discovery of a mass grave in Italy, or rather, in Acropolis, which contained the bodies of over 200 individuals that dated to over 1500 years ago. Now typically, finding hundreds of bodies would be the most alarming part of such a discovery, but not this time. Instead, what really grabbed their attention was just a single specimen, a middle-aged man dubbed TUS 380, who had seemingly died between the age of 40 to 50, and had suffered a very rare kind of trauma seldomly seen, an amputation to his mid-forearm. Given the age of his remains, this procedure, if voluntary, would have happened under zero anesthesia, with a bone saw, no
Imagine that. Having your arm absolutely, like, amputated with absolutely none of current day's assistance, like medication and all that stuff. I mean, it's just straight up brutal pain at this point. Like, ugh. Yeah. At that point, if we're gonna amputate the arm with none of the assistance of today's times, I mean, at the end of the day, they had no option. They did it.
Antibiotics, and without painkillers after, which is a strong first sign that this dude was absolutely metal. But here's the thing, he was also literally metal, as where his stump would be, instead laid a full-on iron knife, pointing in the direction away from the arm and signifying that we had ancient cyborgs before GTA 6. And this knife was by no means for show, as another wild observation the team made was that he lived with this upgrade for many, many years, and showed signs of having endured extreme biomechanical forces. In other words, he used a stabby hand very often. And one pretty grim sign of this was that a good chunk of his teeth were literally grinded down to the pulp cavities, a result of having to constantly fasten his knife straps as they would loosen or go undone. And another good sign that whoever this guy was extremely hardcore, as literally grinding down your teeth to nothingness through overuse has gotta hurt. And he did so apparently while getting frequent bacterial infections and dental abscesses. On top of this, his shoulder also became a sign of the knife's usage, as the bones shifted in a way suggesting that he frequently held his arm in an unnatural position. And then, just in case you needed some more proof, the amputation site itself also showed evidence of intense friction, likely occurring as he wielded his metallic arm. Question is though, what was the knife being used for? And the answer may have been tied to who he was, as he belonged to the Germanic group of people known as the Lombards. And even for ancient times, these guys are—
Wow. Imagine just going to war, guys, like, in these times especially. Yeah, I get it, war these days is kind of brutal because, like, you can just get hit by a stray bullet, which is actually not stray if they were aiming for you. But anyway, like, this right here, this dude right here, there's absolutely no reason as he's attacking this dude for, like, this guy right here to just turn around and just stab him in the back and just take him out completely. And I mean, like, I'm betting this pain, like, look at this. Look at the length of this. If this enters, like, if this enters me, I'm screaming like, because, like, at this point, like, whew, that is going to be there, and I'm gonna feel it. I'm going to feel it, and it's gonna hurt. Yeah, thank God I was born in this in this generation.
Cooked up quite the reputation, being known for their aptitude of war and conflict, and leading to the idea that TUS-380 utilized the knife arm in self-defense and battles, which is where he perhaps had originally lost the arm in the first place. So clearly, this was one badass human with an insanely high pain tolerance, and ultimately, despite his setback, he may have ended up overcoming the odds and winning life. Because as mentioned, he likely died around 50, which was relatively old for the time, with the current thought being that natural causes took him out. Now, a peaceful ending to a tumultuous life is something which sadly cannot be said for another much more ancient find, which revolved around a single shin bone. This fossil came out of the Turkana region in Kenya, and was dated to 1.45 million years ago. In other words, we are not dealing with a Homo sapien here, but scientists could tell that it, without a doubt, belonged to an ancient relative of ours.
Yeah, I doubt in any day and age that this is how they moved or walked, to say the least. I mean, like, no.
But so far, we haven't been able to pinpoint the exact species, as multiple humans.
So you're telling me at one point, we were like, this dude? And this dude? Oh, thank God they blurred it all. We don't want anybody to acting up to monkey titties.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But oh my God, look at this buffalo's horns. Nah, animals back then were a different breed.
Lived in the region at the time, and it certainly does not help that this bone is beyond heavily damaged. Damage, which by the way seems to have been caused by other hominins. And this wasn't your average kind of trauma, being very deliberate and precise, with 9 incision marks ranging across the shin bone that traced where in life the victim's flesh and muscles would have been nestled, and leading to the disturbing realization that scientists had stumbled upon the oldest evidence of a butchered and defleshed human, which in turn
So you're telling me they skinned him alive? Yeah, I'm starting to be more grateful of the fact that I was born in this current generation. Because I would not love to have that kind of a bad day.
screams cannibalism. And here's the other disturbing part of this find. Just like how we don't know who this bone specifically belonged to, we also don't know who ended up killing and subsequently eating them. After all, multiple species were coexisting, and perhaps the...
Oh, so some of them look like this and some of them look like this. I thought they're saying that we all look like this at some point. So these are Homo sapiens, I'm assuming. And these are the other ones. What are they called?
Apparently not so peacefully, leading to the grim possibility that maybe it wasn't the most abnormal thing back then to snack on your friendly neighborhood hominid cousins. It would also be quite on brand for the region, as water sources nearby seemingly fluctuated quite intensely, meaning that droughts would have disrupted the amount of available food sources. And though there have been other discoveries that have competed for the title of the oldest evidence of cannibalism, for now, this shin bone comes out on top, given how straightforward it is. Definitely a bone chiller, pun intended.
Hey, this monkey always gets me all the time, bro. This meme right here, this monkey has turned into a meme, like, it gets me all the time, bro.
Although, while mysteries around it remain, it's not exactly super perplexing, and definitely not as confusing as the Rising Star Cave. The name of this place alone is pretty cool, but trust me, the story gets even cooler, or perhaps crazier. This cave is located in the Malmani Dolomites of South Africa, and is only...
My people, we about to... Okay, this is more closer to me, so I can like, you know, I can see this and be like, okay, that's Uncle Bob right there. I'm joking, but they basically like, you know, they gave birth to my lineage and probably, you know,
only been on modern human radars for a short time, first being mentioned in the 1980s, when it was explored and roughly mapped out by a caving team. However, not much of it ended up being thoroughly.
Cave diving has to be the most stupidest sport I've ever seen in my life, bro. Like, imagine just getting stuck in a cave and dying slowly to that, like, that reality of, oh my god, I'm actually going to die here. Well, no way. Isn't that crazy? I mean, look at this dude. He's probably having the time of his he's probably having the time of his life right now.
Detailed, as they quickly realized that it was a deceptively complex cave system filled with many
Look! He can barely move! And he's still going! Man, some people are different.
hazards. But eventually, given that it was a cave and located in the cradle of humankind, it was re-examined by an anthropological team, who by sheer luck alone discovered a chamber, now dubbed the Dinaleti Chamber. And this area held something remarkable: human bones. And not just a couple, thousands of them, over 1,500 to be exact, which together represented 15 individuals who varied in gender and age, with both infants and elders being amongst the pile. And this range immediately made it the richest assemblage of associated hominin fossils ever unearthed in Africa, a remarkable thing on its own. But here's the odd part: the bones should
That's Uncle Bob right there.
really not have been there.
Uncle Bob. Wow, their skulls are actually pretty small compared to like modern day human.
You see, to reach the chamber in which they were found, you had to overcome some ridiculously hard obstacles, including navigating tens of meters or feet of unlit passages, wiggling through a narrow area which was so tight that only the thinnest people can pass it, and only again when you're in a position akin to the Superman pose. And if you somehow made it past here, you're still not done, because then you'd be forced to scale a jagged steep slope before fitting through another tight passage, and then finally descend down a 12-meter or 49-foot vertical chute. So yeah, not easy. But hey, if you somehow survived this and made it through, well, congrats. You finally just reached the entrance of the chamber, which all goes to show that you don't end up here with a lot of deliberate effort. And originally, the simple explanation was that flooding had swept the already dead individuals into the cave and then into the chamber. However, studies on the site's sediment revealed that it had never been flooded, and that the bodies had been put there over a long period of time, not just in a single event. So this revelation led to the new, bit unsettling thought that maybe a man-eater had been responsible for this whole mess, as it definitely would not have been the first time an animal dragged humans into a cave. Yet, the team didn't really believe this, seeing that of all the bones, only one didn't belong to humans, instead belonging to an owl. And because no animal targets humans so exclusively, and considering that the bones actually had no signs of predation, scientists soon crossed this idea off the list of possibilities. And in fact, the bones did not just have no damage from predation, they also didn't really show any damage at all, something which just further confused researchers, as it strongly implied that the bodies had not been dropped down the massive vertical chute, but rather had been put down gently. But that just
Hundreds of fossils have been recovered, most excavated from a pit a mere yard square. More fossils surely await. So more fossils were right here. Like, they discovered the fossils right here. Ugh. Imagine scaling this, going up here, and then dump. Like, how do you get out of this? Look how big this guy is. I don't know if the scales are proper, but like, look how big this guy is compared to this thin space right here. How does he go through that? Yo, how does someone go through that? I don't understand. Unless you're like breaking out some space so that you can pass through, but like, look, the space is so thin. And then, like, okay, he got some breathing room over here, I guess, but then he has to go through this. Oh my lord, bro. People are different.
been dropped down the massive vertical chute, but rather had been put down gently. But that just brings a further question then of what would be insane enough to pile bodies in an extremely remote, difficult to access part of a cave that is so hard to reach that only humans with modern equipment have been able to do it. And the answer is that it was likely the very same thing that the researchers found: the humans, or rather, to be more specific, an entirely new species of humans, now dubbed Homo naledi. Even today, Homo naledi are a group only known through their Rising Star Cave. But thanks to the sheer quantity of bones, we do actually have a fair idea of what they were like anatomically, being both shorter and lighter than us, while also possessing a smaller relative brain size and a body more adapted for arborealism than other Homo species. It's currently believed that they existed between 335,000 and 236,000 years ago, making them one of our youngest relatives. And while most believe they did have proficiency with tools, thanks to their similar cranial structure, no one thinks they were rocking any advanced climbing gear or navigation tech, and thus leading many to still wonder how on earth did they reach the chamber and whilst carrying bodies at that. And the answer is that we simply don't know. Now, some have stated that they likely navigated the caves with fires, while others have made the hypothesis that they made markings which acted as waypoints. But all studies which have sought to explain the how have ultimately been criticized. And in the end, even the idea that the Naledi put the bodies there themselves is still a debated hypothesis. Heck, I mean, there are even claims that while the fossils are definitely Naledi, maybe it was other Homo species that put them there, with one idea being that long after they died, it was actually us modern humans that buried the bodies in the cave, which if true though, would honestly be way more odd. And something else which would be odd is if you made it this far without dropping a sub or a like. No professional climbing gear required. It's downright insane. And while I am sure at least some would
Yo! Oh my goodness, bro. Oh my lord, man. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry guys. I'm sorry, but like oh my goodness, bro. How do you even oh my god.
Liberally burying a body in a narrow cave is downright insane. And while I am sure at least some would disagree, I think what everyone could agree on, being not normal, is what scientists found at a remote lake in the Trishul Massif of India. This shallow, narrow glacial lake is formally named Rupkund, but to the locals, it's earned the creepy nicknames the Mystery Lake and the Skeleton Lake. And why? Well, simply because around this shallow pool are hundreds and hundreds of bodies. Well, skeletons. Possibly numbering more than 800 individuals at that. And this isn't your typical necropolis or graveyard, because these bodies were not put there deliberately. Rather, they are strewn about, suggesting that scores of individuals have been killed around this tiny lake. Back in the early 1940s, when the site was first discovered, British authorities feared the worst, thinking that these casualties represented a secret invasion by the Japanese into India. But upon further examination, they concluded that while these were definitely Homo sapien remains, the bodies were far too old to be an invading force, which was corroborated by the items they located among the carnage, which included wooden artifacts, iron spearheads, leather slippers, and rings. And so obviously, researchers were extremely perplexed as to how so many people had died here at once. And one clue that might have held the answer were the bodies themselves, as due to the surrounding temperature and altitude of the lake, many of the victims were well preserved, in some cases even containing flesh. And what they noticed was that a lot of the individuals were all killed by the same thing.
Wow, imagine like this dude right here. They just propped up his head on a stick. And what kind of bone is this? This looks like a femur bone. Like it looks too big and too long to be any other thing else. Isn't like the femur bone like the biggest bone in the body? Wow. People are actually brutal, guys.
A large, round object. To be specific, on the upper bodies and heads, the common injury which was found was blunt force, that appeared to be in the shape of a fallen object, like a stone or a large piece of ice. And interestingly enough, when talking with the nearby villages, scientists heard about a local legend, which told of an ancient king who, along with his family and entourage, had been killed by a large hailstorm when trying to pass through the mountain. And so given this loose account, plus the actual injuries they found on the bodies, The team concluded that Skeleton Lake had in fact seen a massive hailstorm, and therefore resulting in a large number of deaths.
No way. Like, talk about this image right here. Where is that? Like this right here. Okay, take this for an example. What kind of hailstorm sets up the bones like this? Unless like the people now that are recording this set up these bones, but like what kind of hailstorm does this? Sets it all up like this. And also, where's that other clip? The part with the guy where his skull was like just up there, like on a stick. Come on, bro. There is no way a hailstorm did like killed him and then propped him up like that.
More specimens, which revealed that the dead did not represent just one group, but at least 3 different ones, all from different times and regions. Now, 2 of them seem to have died here around 1,000 years ago, within a few decades of each other, and showed typical South Asian ancestry and Southeast Asian ancestry, respectively, while the 3rd group was from a very unexpected region, mainland Greece and Crete. And these outliers had also not died so long ago, with estimates being as recent as just 200 years ago, making more than a few wonder if the lake is even safe to visit nowadays. And obviously we could answer this if we knew what killed each group, but alas, we do not, and for now it's considered a mystery. Most still think a hailstorm is what killed at least a few of them, but 3 separate hail events in this one remote location, which were deadly enough to take out humans, seems highly unlikely, especially when combined with the lack of clear injuries. And the whole thing is even more bizarre when you realize that the identified groups came from the analysis of just 38 individuals. So in other words, who knows just how many groups fell victim to Skeleton Lake? So for now, the mystery remains. But mystery does not always equal the spook.
So if that was just a hailstorm, like a natural occurrence, then that has nothing to do with humans being insane. So what's the actual point of that clip being added here? Unless they're saying that like people fought and were killed and brutally murdered each other and propped each other up in such certain ways instead of their skeletons and their bodies to be set up in a specific way for all those who were passing by to be warned, then would you say, okay, that's like showing that humans are actually brutal? If not so, then there's nothing over there that says humans are insane. There's nothing that proves right there in that clip. But anyway, man, let's hope something else steers us in the direction of this topic.
Spookiest, and something which I personally would feel even more uncomfortable around may have been something actually created out of good intentions. Plastered human skulls. In the 1930s, around the Levant, and especially around the city of Jericho, researchers stumbled upon a frightening object that resembled a human head. It had been constructed through multiple layers of wrapped plaster that were painted and adorned with seashells in order to give the impressions of eyes, hair, and skin. A bit unsettling for sure, yet nothing compared to when they actually pried open these plasters, as within these plastered mockeries were real heads, or at least what was left of them. In total, over 20 heads were found, which dated to between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago, and primarily represented adult men, although a few were children and women too. Now what's disturbing, beyond the whole
Okay. Okay, now that's actually insane.
whole head and plaster part, is that the jaw bones had all been removed, and that each of these heads had been placed underneath what would have been homes. An interesting place to store heads, no doubt. And this prompted great interest in why people had created them in the first place, with one of the original ideas being that the artists, if you want to call them that, had killed whoever these heads belonged to, and then taken them as trophies, with the plastering process being a bit like what's seen with shrunken heads. In other words, a ritual of sorts. However, in recent times, a much more wholesome hypothesis has emerged, which is that because the skulls were buried underneath people's houses, they might have represented one of the earliest forms of burial practices in civilization.
Yeah, man, I mean, that seems more likely the reasonable explanation. Like, people passed away, and then after that, like, the locals in the area just decided to, like, plaster their faces and, like, to preserve the look and imagery of how they looked when they were alive. So I don't know if I would say that the first case was actually true, rather the second one actually seemed more accurate.
Additionally, it's been unveiled that these skulls did not remain locked away, but were periodically handled over long periods of time. So long, in fact, that while they were likely started as known deceased individuals, they eventually became just known as an ancestor to whoever was handling them, which was perhaps too much of a commitment, as after a 2,000-year window, the Jericho-plastered skulls seems to have vanished from existence, with only one remnant being left behind in the culture, a mythical tale of all things, which was discovered in the region thousands of years later. And it goes like this. A mortal, what does he get in the end? What does a mortal finally get? Glaze poured on his head, lime on top of his skull. Pretty somber for something possibly meant to celebrate ancestors. But honestly, unsettling worship just seemed to be the trend back in the day. And there's actually a way more disturbing example of hypothetical worship. Let me introduce you to the human jigsaw. And yes, it's just as bad as it sounds. As opposed to the Levant, this brutal find came out of Scotland, where near South Uist, in Scotland's Outer Hebrides, 4 Bronze Age skeletons were located. Like the Jericho skulls, they were found within ancient houses, with the main difference being that they were above the floor, not beneath, and were lying in pretty normal manners, indicating that they hadn't died in any noteworthy way. And for the most part, they were considered routine finds. Until, that is, under further examination, a contradiction was identified. One of the bodies, a presumed female, turned out to be not all female. To be exact, most of the body was, yet the skull was male, and so were some of the other parts. And in a further twist, those other parts turned out to have come from really 2 males, resulting in the stark realization that this skeleton was actually a combination of 3 different individuals. And lo and behold, the other specimens turned out to be a mashup of different people too. Pretty gnarly. And it only gets worse, as another find was that these jigsaw humans had been, well, pickled, essentially, with the bodies showing signs of demineralization, something that happens when you stew a human in an extremely acidic environment. And conveniently nearby was a peat bog, which, as it just so happens, contained the necessary amount of acidity, leading to the idea that they had been in the peat bog for quite some time. However, as mentioned, they were not found in the bog itself, which created just more questions, as this meant that someone had purposely stitched multiple bodies together, dipped it in a peat bog, waited oh so very patiently, and then placed the final product in their house. And just to shake things up a tad more, radiocarbon dating found that the bodies were hundreds of years older than the actual building. So what does this all mean? Well, the most likely answer, according to the researchers, is that this was an extreme form of ancestral worship, where for hundreds of years a Bronze Age community in Scotland kept deceased relatives above ground entwined in a jigsaw monstrosity, which they also seemed to pass down and add to through time. In other words, more bodies were added as people died. Of course, there is also again the more grim possibility that these were not an example of ancestor worship, but rather were trophies. But given just the sheer amount of effort that went into making them, most think that's probably not the case. And given the known instances of violence from ancient times, this does seem to track, as they weren't exactly careful and meticulous with their fallen foes' remains. And honestly, even compared to some of the messed up things that have happened in today's times, I'd have to say that ancient violence shows to have been quite a bit more deranged. After today's times, I'd have to say
this time right here, the time of medieval times, I don't know, this looks like medieval times, but like, damn, these guys were absolutely like the baddest of the bad. Like they were badass for real. Like they were just cut different, man. Going to war, I feel like they were going to war steady, honestly, because like, whoa. You have to be sharp and steadily to be always ready. You know what I mean? Like, oof.
That ancient violence shows to have been quite a bit more deranged. After all, there was a whole period, the Neolithic, where people seemed to be all about unusual cruel killings, with multiple large sites even being found throughout Eurasia. In fact, so many brutal discoveries are known of that I even made a full video on it. So go check that out if that sounds interesting. Additionally, due to the period's notoriety, researchers have even become a bit desensitized to Neolithic murders, with very few cases of violence outside of this time being able to compete. But there is one location in the US that actually comes pretty darn close, with it also representing a potential meltdown of an entire society. Now, our story here begins in southwestern Colorado, where back in the day an ancient culture was known to reside, now known as the Basket Maker Pueblo culture. For thousands of years they lived in the region, and were known to inhabit pit houses, which simply put is a house built in the ground and used for shelter. And it was in a few of these structures and their surroundings that an extremely horrific scene was discovered.
They would just build houses like in the ground. That's ant activity. Man, people have really evolved, man.
Discovered an entire community wiped from the face of the earth. There were at least 24 bodies in total, but it was 7 in particular that grabbed people's attention, as they were beyond destroyed. Their bones had been cleaned of flesh, roasted, and cracked open, while the skulls were scorched, smashed, and had scoop marks showing signs of people fishing the brains out. All evidence that a mass cannibalistic feast had gone down.
Nah. Like, I feel like if you kill somebody, you should not be eating their body, bro. Cannibalism is not allowed at that point. I don't care how hungry they were back then or how much they needed food or anything. Yeah. It should just not be a thing. I don't know. I just feel like it shouldn't be a thing. Cannibalism? If you kill somebody, rather let, like, if they die, if you wanna his brains out, you might guess at that point. But if he's living and you go and bonk, 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 and then say, well, dinner's ready. What?
And this was no simple attack, as the site was not only abandoned, but also defiled, suggesting that whoever lived there did not take captives, but rather were the captives, or victims, being attacked, killed, and then eaten within their very own homes. And evidence beyond the actual bodies included blood-stained tools and cooking pots. In other words, they may have been cooked in the very same pots that they used to make supper. It also seems that whoever cannibalized the victims had absolutely zero remorse or pity for the dead, as perhaps the worst discovery of it all was the coprolite, meaning in this case, human feces, within the cold ashes of one of the pit house's hearth, suggesting that one of the attackers deliberately defiled the house after the gruesome events unfolded. And given that cooking her,
So he just shat everywhere after he killed everyone. I don't know that. That's a bit much. That's a bit much if you ask me. Like, they're already dead. Who are you defiling the house for? Like, keep your shit in your pants.
earths were integral parts of this culture. This act could be viewed in some ways as the ultimate insult. And honestly, given the sheer brutality of everything, there was actually some initial pushback on the findings, claiming that perhaps a foreign culture had invaded, or that the bodies weren't actually cannibalized, with the damage having come from other means. Yet unfortunately, this turned out to be some wishful thinking, as one damning piece of evidence came to light, and that was the coprolite itself. As after testing, scientists found the presence of myoglobin, human myoglobin. And that doesn't just end up in your stool unless you've been gnawing on someone, mainly someone's flesh, as myoglobin is not found in most organs or vessels. Furthermore, whoever did this disrespectful deed in the hearth must have been a serious cannibal, since opposed to other coprolites known in the region, this one was all myoglobin, meaning that for 12 hours before defecating, human was the only thing this unknown individual was snacking on. No veggies, no fruits, nada, just straight human. But here's the thing though, while this example is the most brutal one in the locality, it was actually just one piece of a larger puzzle, as out of the blue researchers noted that the basket maker Pueblo culture had at some point gone from pretty chill to straight killing and eating other humans. A bit similar to what we've seen in other Neolithic cultures. And that
Oh my god, isn't that insane? How you can just be a peaceful tribe living on your own, just making baskets and stuff. And then one day, some dudes just wake up and decide, well, I'm bored. So I'm just going to take my time chopping each and every one of you. And maybe I might make a stew out of some of you, but That will be after, of course, shitting in your houses. Just to add insult to injury. Isn't that crazy? yo, people are just like, yo. I know I keep saying this, but like people are just different. Back then, though, I know there are some psychopaths right now that are just like that, but like back then, it was just like any and everywhere, and people didn't bear consequence for their actions. If I had to think about it, really, because like what law are you going to come forward to? Which judge to serve time for your crime? Nope. Oh, okay. Roam free then.
And eating other humans, a bit similar to what we've seen in other Neolithic cultures. And actually, it has one of the highest rates of suspected cannibalism and violence of any known ancient culture, with one study finding 72 sites with signs of cannibalism, 38 of them being definitive. And then on top of that, another analysis of 870 skeletons found that more than 8% bore cannibalism marks, while rates of violence were even higher. And given how this gnarly episode of violence kinda just sprung out of nowhere,
bro just looks like he's sleeping low-key. Like, how does he die like that? He looks like, they both look like they're actually just sleeping. Crazy position to be sleeping in, like, he's sleeping under his butt, but like, you know, nonetheless, they, like, he's sleeping under his butt, but nonetheless, they look like they're sleeping. I don't know what here says, like, cannibalism was enacted, other than the, like, absolutely crushed domes that they suffered right here, but like, oh. Like, they went specifically for the left side of the head. Boom, boom. Damn.
many have wondered why. And though debates remain, one idea which has emerged as the favorite answers this mystery through two important coincidences. The first being that around the same time, roughly 850 years ago, the Chaco system, which essentially was the heart of this culture, mysteriously collapsed and disappeared. And then the second coincidence was that severe droughts had struck the land after periods of plentiful rain. And when you combine all this together, you get a land so desolate due to droughts that society essentially slowly imploded, with the cannibalism reflecting the unimaginable final days, where people turned on each other just to survive. So yeah, pretty messed up. But let me just remind you, these remains, stories, and evidence is just what we've found so far. There are undoubtedly untold amounts of mysteries, brutalities, and oddities just waiting to be discovered. But hey, on that cheerful note, if you somehow made it through all of this without needing therapy, congrats. You're made of stronger stuff than those Jericho skulls. And if you want some more reasons that'll make you question humanity,
that was actually a pretty interesting video. The discoveries that proves that humans are absolutely insane. Yeah, generally, like, humans are actually insane, and I don't think the insanity has stopped. Like, I mean, look at the news. A lot of people are still doing what a lot of these people did back then today. Like, whew. Like, the Jeffrey Dahmer incident, man? He was actually eating people's hearts. I want you to think about that. Anyway, guys, it's been a great video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.